episode 284 of the CRICKETher Weekly. Apologies, first of all, for recording this a day later than usual. First of all, we wanted to wait until the final of the Women's 100, or the result of the final of the Women's 100 was known. Secondly, Sid has just about emerged from his Lord's press box cake-induced coma. How are you feeling, Sid?
Honestly, I do feel slightly cake hungover.
Well, there you go. And we're guessing that the Superchargers are also feeling slightly worse for wear this morning.
Probably not from cake.
Probably not from cake. Well done to the pop chips. I'm going to go out today, Sid, and buy a family bag of pop chips and eat them all in celebration.
Okay. It's what Mr. KP would have wanted.
Absolutely. By the way, we're not being sponsored. I just like pop chips. I tell you what was really interesting about the final, Sid, was that it was Nicola Carey's innings for the Superchargers, chasing admittedly a low total, but she was the highest scorer, and she didn't hit the winning runs in the end, but she was there at the other end when Sutherland hit the winning runs, and it was a very important innings, despite the fact that a couple of weeks ago she had no idea that she was about to be flown to England to play in this competition.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago it was, who is Nicola Carey? And now, everybody knows who she is now. That's really
I think
unfair.
people did know who
Nicola
she
Carey
was.
has been a fantastic player for Australia. Yeah. She's won several World Cups. This ultimate, when she looks back on her career, winning this will not really register in her trophy cabinet, given that there's several World Cup winning medals in it. But yeah, 2 weeks ago she was apparently, just sort of kicking back in Hobart, doing her cold weather training, and she said it was not warm in Hobart, but she got the call. She was on a plane 3 days later. It's pretty amazing, isn't it, to think that, you'd round the world within 3 days.
She was on a plane a day and a half after the call, and she was on the pitch 3 days later. So all of this talk about, we need acclimatisation and we need to be match ready and we need to do X, Y and Z before we ever get onto a cricket pitch. Nope. You just do it. If you're Nicola Carey, you're just the ultimate pro. She seems like quite a chilled person. She was quite sanguine about the whole thing. She was obviously absolutely delighted, just to say, to have been kind of called out of the winter of Tasmania into what's been quite a nice British summer, with the last couple of days accepting. Anyway, what were you going to say, Sid?
Well, no, just that she's been able to come over here and just turn it on at the drop of a hat, and she's been a really important player. She was important yesterday. She was also important in that semi-final, I think, because she came in at the end and swept her way to, she hit a load of runs off the last set, which did make a difference. It didn't look like they were going to make 200 at one point, and it felt like 200 was the real barrier where you'd go, even though this is a belter of a pitch, I don't think we can chase this. If they'd finished on 190, then just maybe Spirit are going, we can chase this. But over 200, psychologically, something goes off in your head. And so, and she's been fantastic, it was just great to see. Georgia Wareham was still being carried around yesterday in cardboard cutout form. Thanks to Kate Cross, who got a cardboard cutout Georgia Wareham made. So cardboard cutout Georgia Wareham was able to enjoy the celebrations.
The trophy lift, yeah. Shall we talk about the semi-final though, Sid? Because I actually said to you when we were coming home from the Eliminator, from the Oval on Saturday evening, I said, nothing that happens tomorrow is going to eclipse what we've just seen. And it wasn't about
nothing that happens in the next 10 years is going to eclipse what we've seen.
Well, there you go. I mean, it wasn't about the highest score or the highest total by a team in the 100, although it was about that spectacular individual performance from Davina Perrin. And what we've talked about on last week's episode of the 100, we talked about the fact that it's been Australian players who have been very dominant with the bat, and that was a kind of trend that continued actually in the final, because it was as well as Carey and Sutherland, who we've already mentioned, it was Phoebe Litchfield coming out and having a nice little cameo innings that also kind of propelled them to that win. But on Saturday, it was a young 18-year-old by the name of Davina Perrin who just grabbed all the headlines. And I wrote for The Guardian yesterday, she actually propelled her team into the final, herself into England contention. And ultimately, I think that on this occasion, Superchargers playing in the Eliminator and having such a dominant performance, and there being such a special performance by Davina Perrin, was the thing that helped them win that final, because it just gave them that extra confidence boost. And it kind of would have made them think, well, if we can play it even like, 70% of how we played yesterday at the Oval, we can win this thing. And they did, despite the fact that in the group stages it had all been about Brave.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a once in a lifetime performance, and honestly, as far as Davina Perrin is concerned, if she does that again in her entire career, she's got probably 15 years of cricket career ahead of her. If she does that again in her entire career, she will have done pretty damn well. I haven't seen anything like it really since the Harman monster, since the Harmanpreet's innings in that 2017 World Cup semi-final here in England. That was the last time I saw someone really just like see a ball so clearly and dominate so much. We've seen big innings, but it was interesting to think back about Tammy's 100, because Tammy obviously has also scored 100 in the 100, the only other woman to have done so. But something about that just wasn't quite as dominant as, she wasn't kind of, the Davina Perrin sixes weren't creeping over the boundary, they were going 6 rows back into the crowd, beyond the LEDs, beyond the picket fence into the crowd. Nobody does that so consistently, and this is the last time we saw that. That was what Harmanpreet was doing back then. And Harmanpreet has never been able to recreate that, because how do you recreate that greatest of all moments? You can't, but you just have to kind of push forward, and you can carry on doing great things, and hopefully Davina Perrin will.
Can I say, just a moment in terms of reflecting on the historic significance of the innings, because from an English perspective, I think that we can go further back beyond by which this is the greatest innings. I think this is the most exciting innings by a young English player since Charlotte Edwards hit 173 against Ireland in the 1997 World Cup final. I didn't see it, I wasn't there, but I've read about it. And actually, I don't know if you know this, but Charlotte Edwards went on to have quite a good career after she did that the day before her 18th birthday. Davina Perrin's nearly a year older than Lottie was, but I think, so I think the history of this kind of goes back, or the historical significance of this goes back even further than the Harman monster. But
what I want to say about Davina Perrin in particular is that she does continue to improve, and that's what's so important. If the semi-final hadn't happened, right, say it got rained off and they just got through to the final and everything else had gone as is, we'd look back now, we'd be going, Davina Perrin, she had a good tournament, she got that 70, she got a couple of other,
she's had a solid season.
She's definitely, she's done better than last season, really promising for the future. That one innings has just come upended everything. I mean, the expectations will all be on her, but I mean, I think it's now unconscionable that she will not be in the next England T20 team, for example. She has to be.
There's actually a couple of people on social media, probably more than a couple, but a couple that I saw are actually saying, can England at this point change their 50 over World Cup squad for India and include her?
Yeah, I mean, I believe they can, because they won't have named the squad to the ICC yet, I don't think, because otherwise we'd have seen all of the squads named.
Okay.
But I mean, they're not going to. They shouldn't at this point,
probably
because
not.
They have a squad. They know what they're going to do. You can't upend things at that point. You can't do that to the players. And also, it's a different format, right?
We said this a couple of weeks ago on the CRICKETher Weekly, that actually, can performances in the 100 are they really a signifier of success in 50 over cricket? That's not to say that Davina Perrin can't be a really good 50 over player as well, but it would probably be a slightly strange call to suddenly upend your World Cup squad on the basis of this one innings, as spectacular
as great as it was. Yes, absolutely.
But you're absolutely right that the next time England play a T20 international, which currently they're not scheduled to do until next May, I believe, they've got a very empty winter, perhaps that will change, she's got to be in there. And Nicola Carey in the press conference last night after Northern Superchargers won the final actually said, let's see, maybe we'll see her up here in a year's time in the World Cup final for England. And I think that's quite likely. I mean,
does that mean Nicola Carey's backing England to win the World Cup? Not Australia?
I don't know. She said in the final. I think maybe the implication. I don't care to speak for Nicola Carey. The implication may have been that England were in a home final against Australia, but of course Australia win. Anyway, I mean, surely Lottie will already have been on the phone to Dav Perrin, because I don't know if Lottie was at the Oval, but if she wasn't there in person, she will have been watching, because she's a Badger.
I believe she was at the Oval.
She was at the Oval. Well, there you go. So she actually saw it live, and so presumably she will have gone and actually sought Davina Perrin out either after the the eliminator, or maybe waited until after the final.
Davina Perrin would have already been in her sights, but I mean, she's leapfrogged Alice Capsey now, for example. I mean, she definitely has, because Alice Capsey just hasn't had that development over the past, and Alice Capsey's never done that. No. Even Phoebe Litchfield's never done that. Georgia Voll's never done that. No. So fantastic stuff.
It's a great counterpoint to a lot of the negativity that we've had as well about where's the next generation coming from? Where are our exciting young stars? During the Ashes, that's what we were saying a lot. Where's our Georgia Voll? Well, here she is. She's just announced herself to the world. We knew she was there. I interviewed her for The Guardian a year ago, but I've not seen her play. She's not played like this.
No, not quite like
it was
this.
Interesting.
She showed hints of it.
Yeah, it was interesting. I said, "Is this your greatest ever knock?" Interviewing her afterwards, and she sort of hesitated and went, "Yeah, I think so." I was like, I was expecting a slightly more definitive answer than that. If you have played the greater knock, if you have played the greater knock, Dav, then can you tell me so that I can go and watch the highlights, please? Yeah, it was just incredible to see, and it was definitely one of those I was there moments as well. We felt that after seeing the Harmanpreet Kaur one live at Derby in 2017, and to have actually been there, it was very special. You mentioned Capsey there. Again, some of the conversation around Davina Perrin has also been, let's not bring her into England because they'll ruin her. Oh, she's too young. We did the same thing with Capsey and we got too excited. And how do you balance those things, Sid?
Well, I do think there's an extent to which, and a lot of people have already said this, not the first person to have said this, I do think there's an extent to which things will be different under Charlotte Edwards. I think that John Lewis probably in retrospect wasn't the right person to be taking Capsey through those crucial 2 years, and I think that Charlotte Edwards will have a very different approach to the way that she brings Davina Perrin into the team. It will be a more caring approach, a more kind of inclusive approach. And I think that Charlotte Edwards will have a better eye on the longer term and on actually continuing to develop the player, which I think possibly was one of the John Lewis's problems, that he didn't develop batters in particular. Charlotte
Edwards has definitely got a better...
I'm not worried about that.
Charlotte Edwards has definitely got a better track record of doing that at Hampshire / Vipers / Brave than basically any other coach in the country. So I think that's a fair point. How are we feeling overall about the 100, Sid? Because one of the things that came up in the post-match presses yesterday was both Nicola Carey and Georgia Adams, who we had from Southern Brave, kind of talking about their team environments and those being the things that have helped them reach that final. And it being those particular collections of players coming together and just really gelling. And actually, there's a lot of uncertainty and anxiety about the future because we are hearing noises about, for example, moving to a player auction system whereby the players would basically have no choice or no say over where they go. We're going to potentially see teams, groups that have been really successful. The Brave are a good example. Over a number of years have built up a core of players, but I think Superchargers as well, to some extent, have built up a core of kind of 5 or 6 and somehow kept that core together, even over various different iterations of how players have been selected in the women's 100. And now that's potentially just going to be torn up over the winter by the new owners, who, as we understand it, are due to meet in October, and have actually kind of said, like, we think that a player auction is the way to go. Yeah.
So one thing that our viewers will be asking is, like, what's the difference in terms really between an auction and a draft?
Yeah.
And one of the answers to that is, in theory, not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the auction obviously, is potentially the top players can get paid a lot more because you can kind of push the numbers up, whereas the draft, you go, this is how much we're paying at this level. But does that pertain to what Georgia Adams is saying about, the players want more say? Surely in an auction you don't have any more say than a draft is. And the kind of quiet bit that Georgia Adams has said out loud here is that the draft in the 100, certainly in the women's competition, was a little bit of a sham. Okay. So players had, in many, many cases, already agreed deals. They knew exactly what was going to happen. Everyone had told them, everyone sat down, had a little chat and go, okay, we're going to get you at 20,000. We're going to leave her because, X have already said, I had a word with X's coach and she said she was going to bid 30,000 for her. So we're not going to get her. But all those conversations happened beforehand, which meant the players had actually a lot more agency in practice than they would have done in theory. So what the players are concerned about is that the new owners are going to go, well, damn that to hell. We're going to actually give you no agency, and we're going to create this auction. This auction is going to be brutal, and you're just going to say Adams there, Bart there, blah there, and it's all over. The other thing that particularly pertains to Georgia Adams is that actually, Georgia Adams has, had a high tier contract. She's the captain of the Brave,
which you get a captain's bonus as well as your base salary. Yeah.
Has she really performed on a level that's justified that? I mean, the captain's role alone is important. I'm definitely one to say that with all the things that I say about Grace Scrivens.
But Brave have been so dominant that she's not had a huge amount to do with that ball, right?
But she has this season been carried by other players. It's quite likely that if the new Indian owners come in next year and totally moneyball the system and say, well, our moneyball people are coming in from the IPL and the WPL, they're going to take charge of this draft system. Someone like Georgia Adams is going to suddenly find that she's on a £5,000 contract, not a £50,000 one.
And she's not going to be captain. Yeah. Because what will happen is that the largely Indian-based new owners in the 100 will go, right, we're having Harmanpreet as captain there, Smriti as captain there, Jemmy as captain over there.
Yeah, they want their superstar. There's nothing wrong with this. They just said this is a perfectly reasonable decision. You go, we make our superstars
maybe there's nothing wrong with it, but on the other hand, we've previously bemoaned the lack of leadership opportunities for young players within English cricket. This is going to wipe out potentially another generation of leaders getting those opportunities, because we are, who was the winning captain in the 100, Sid?
Kate Cross, wasn't it, right?
It was Holly Armitage, right?
Okay, but this is interesting in itself, because actually, if you talk to most casual fans will go, Kate Cross was the captain, wasn't she?
Yeah, because, I suppose because she's got a very high public profile, and maybe she will be the captain next year, or a captain next year. She's certainly more likely to be. My point is that somebody like Holly Armitage or your Georgia Adams is likely to miss out because they just aren't names.
Yeah.
People don't know them, and even though Holly Armitage did get a shot for England, 18 months or so ago, maybe she'll never play for England again, etc. So it's just that's an element of it that concerns me, and there is certainly a lot of anxiety amongst the players. I actually went on BBC Radio 5 Live yesterday during the innings break in the women's 100 and talked a little bit about this because nobody knows. And actually, Georgia Adams in the press conference, she was trying very hard to tread a diplomatic line. She said the nature of what we're doing now is you've just got to roll with what's happening, roll with the changes, be open to change. But everyone feels like the 100 is just starting to take off. It feels like just when things get successful in women's cricket, they change things and we have to kind of adjust to that. She said, hopefully they don't change too much, but we'll just have to wait and see what's thrown at us. So what she's saying is that the players are completely disempowered in this, especially in the women's 100.
Yeah, particularly the female players. Yeah. All these changes are being driven by stuff they want for the men's game.
Yeah, it's things that are happening to them rather than with them, and that's really hard. If you're a player now and you just have no clue. They've already gone through the upheaval of moving from regions to counties this season, and so I just really feel for them, and you just think, the 100's still incredibly successful at getting people through the door, right? So we've had record crowds at 4 venues this season: the Oval, Old Trafford, Southampton, and a record crowd at Lord's of all time yesterday in the women's 100 for the final. And that's still a brilliant element of it. But if the kind of principle of gender equality somehow gets lost in the transition to the new owners, then it's not the 100 anymore. It's not what's made it the 100.
Yep.
Okay. Should we talk about other news, Sid? Because
has there been some other news?
Tell
me about it.
Okay.
Tell us all about
it. Actually, quite soon after we recorded last week, I think the day after, it was announced that Cricket South Africa had included Dane van Niekerk in a training camp prior to the World Cup, from which they are going to select their 15 players for the World Cup. Dane then revoked her international retirement, which had happened 2 years ago. She revoked that on Instagram and issued an apology to Cricket South Africa for the way that she'd handled it. So for a few days, there's this huge talk and discussion and people going, oh, she's going to be in the World Cup squad, including from me. I went on the Wisdom podcast midweek and said, oh, I don't understand why she would have apologised to Cricket South Africa if somebody hadn't said to her, you're in line for selection for the World Cup. And also, why has she now suddenly revoked her international retirement? Then on Friday, the coach of South Africa comes out and says, no, she's not going to play in the World Cup. We've included her as part of the group so she can, quote, understand what the expectations are. Now, presumably that's partly around kind of fitness, because that seems to have been the issue last time. Seems to me like a big mess, partly caused by Cricket South Africa's really poor communications around this. Because if you announce that she's going to be in your training squad for the World Cup, and then
bear in mind, this is one of the most famous players that's played the game in the last 20 years.
People are going
to... proper global superstar.
People are going
recognisable people.
People are going to take hold of that, especially if she simultaneously says, oh no, I'm no longer retired from international cricket. People are going to put 2 and 2 together and make 5 in this case. But it looked like it was actually putting 2 and 2 together and making 4. I think it's been really poorly handled. And I think that it's going to detract from what should have been a nice smooth preparation for South Africa in the build-up to the World Cup. And it seems like it's been an unnecessary thing, and I just can't quite understand exactly what's happened and why.
Yeah, I worry slightly that she's just having difficulty, honestly, handling her retirement. I mean, for a sports person, handling your retirement, is the toughest thing you have to do.
Yeah.
And some people make smooth transitions into, broadcasting. Some people just go off and, become lawyers or, whatever, and have very successful careers. You met someone the other week that became a university professor.
Yeah, former England player Ruth Lupton, who actually only played for England a couple of times, but she played a lot of county cricket. She was definitely up there at that time in the 80s and 90s as one of the best players in the country, if not quite the elite of the elite. And when she retired from cricket, she stopped cricket altogether. And she just said that she found it really difficult in terms of her identity to adjust to that. So she then became an academic, and then she said that absorbed and became her identity. And then she retired from being an academic and suddenly had to go through the same kind of problematic process a couple of decades later. It's not easy. And that was in the pre-professional era when your cricket was actually in many ways a kind of a hobby, although one that took over a lot of your life, but you weren't being paid for it. It wasn't your job, but it was still such a fundamental element of your identity. Goodness only knows what it's like now. I mean, imagine that, something that's such a fundamental part of yourself, and then you're in your 30s and somebody takes it away from you. It's really hard to adjust and to kind of make peace with, I suppose. That's what we're seeing is Van Niekerk trying to make peace with... Yeah, that's why I worry that
she's struggling to do that, and that she hasn't found that next thing that she wants to do, which is why she seems to keep wanting to kind of go back. And that maybe at some point, you just can't go back anymore, and you have to accept that and move forwards. But, it's tough for her, and I hope she's okay with this. Because...
But on the other hand, if she's being told by Cricket South Africa, oh, well, we're including you in this squad, that on this training camp that's gonna be part of how we select the World Cup squad, that's mixed messages,
she feels
isn't it?
She's got a chance, and then they come out a week later and go, you've got no chance.
So that's what concerns me, is that they're giving her mixed messages.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she's not going to be playing in the World Cup, and I hope that everything's okay. Talking of the World Cup, Sid, and I think this is probably the last thing that we're going to talk about this week, but following on from our conversation about England's selection of their World Cup squad last week, we've actually now had an intervention from Nat Sciver-Brunt, who was interviewed on Sky after the Trent Rockets game, and was obviously asked about the selection.
Now let's put this into context, because last week we discussed the fact that the Lydia Greenway, when she'd been broadcasting, had been asked about the squad, and Lydia Greenway had essentially washed her hands of it live on the television on Sky and gone, well, nothing to do with me, Governor. That was all Nat Sciver that didn't want Kate Cross in her team, and you can't blame me for not choosing Kate Cross. So this week, Nat Sciver comes out.
This is Nat Sciver-Brunt's response to that. She says, Charlotte Edwards and I had a chat about the various positions that were more difficult in selecting, and then Lottie took that conversation into the selectors. She was then asked who has the final say, and very unequivocally said in the meeting that would be the final say. So this is Nat Sciver-Brunt basically saying, sorry Lydia, but the responsibility is that of the selection panel. And I absolutely don't blame her for saying that. I think fundamentally she's just been honest, because our understanding is that this was how it was going to work. This is why Lottie didn't include her as one of the selectors. She said, I'll have a chat to Nat beforehand, and then I will obviously think about her views and take them into account, but it's up to us as the selectors to make those difficult calls.
Yeah, and when you make difficult calls, for goodness sake, take responsibility for them. Don't, make a difficult call and then walk out and go, oh, nothing to do with me, governors, or somebody else's fault, just because the player is upset.
I mean, that's kind of what we said last week, isn't it? And I'm actually pleased to see that now Sciver-Brunt has kind of bitten back a bit. But it does feel like at the moment there isn't that sense of collective responsibility from the selectors who we're actually hearing from. And it does show the issues, doesn't it, with having your kind of chief national selector still working in the media. I mean, the equivalent in the men's game a few years ago was Ed Smith.
Yeah, no, this exact thing happened. Ed Smith was working for Sky, and presumably on very good money with Sky, and he went off to become the England selector. And what happened to his Sky role?
He had to give it up.
Yeah, he had to give it up.
Now, there's probably a thing with the pay disparity, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is the issue here, right? The ECB don't want to pay the England selector for the women's team anything like enough money to give up her Sky role.
It's not a full-time role. It's 100 days a year. That was what was in the job ad.
Yeah, so, we don't know what it's being paid, but I'm guessing it's nothing like as much as Ed Smith was being paid.
No.
And
so that's a problem
that's why
that
she's
they've
carrying
created
on,
for themselves.
She's got a young family, of course she wants to carry on earning money. So really, actually, the problem lies with the ECB and their continual attempts to do women's cricket like the men's game, but on the cheap.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? The other thing that Nat Sciver-Brunt said that you actually tweeted about afterwards, Sid, was... she was asked about Kate Cross specifically because, of course, that's been the big talking point. And she said, I sent Kate a message. She hasn't replied to me. I sent Kate a message. She hasn't replied to me. Again, probably not the best way to have framed that particular event. Now, I can well believe that this is what's happened, and that for Kate it's still very raw and she doesn't necessarily want to reply to Nat and just say everything's okay. For me, what's happened here is actually that Nat's been a little bit too honest, and she's trying to actually answer the question that was asked of her, which is basically have you spoken to Kate? And so she's gone, well, I haven't actually spoken to her, but I did send her a message. And the reason I haven't spoken to her is because she didn't respond. But the way that she's put it so baldly actually sounds really bad.
Yeah, it was very Nat being Nat, I think. I don't think she meant anything by it. And I certainly don't think that she meant, well, she hasn't texted me back, and that's rude
and outrageous. Yeah. No, she didn't mean that at all.
She didn't mean that. She was just she was giving a really literal answer, but it was very Nat being Nat. Yeah. Probably you should have just made a... I sent her a text and I'm sure I'll speak to her soon or something. Yeah,
exactly. There are so many better ways that you could have phrased it. And I wonder if she had ECB media guidance and help with that interview, because it didn't read like it. And I know they're in the middle of the 100, but if you're going to go and do an interview and be asked about this big news story about the World Cup selection, it's obvious that you're going to be asked about it, for starters. So if you know that, then think about what your answer is going to be, say that to your ECB media person and help them, get them to help you and guide you with the best way to frame it. So I don't know whether it's another example of perhaps the ECB slightly dropping the ball on these kind of slightly more sort of subtle and what feel like smaller comms issues, but all actually add up to a picture of
it's all a bit chaotic.
Yeah, exactly. And communication and situations and interviews that don't lead then to a conducive environment, because what happens the next time Kate comes across Nat? There's no way she won't have seen that. It's all over social media.
Absolutely.
And if I was Kate watching that, I'd be like, hey, hang on, don't drop me in it. But that's not what Nat meant to say, but it is what she said.
Yeah. I'm sure Kate had hundreds and hundreds of messages, and she's probably not going to get round to replying to all of them. I mean, I know that Alex Hartley said to her on the podcast what she said to her in real life, which was, to a certain extent, you have to put your phone down and just people are being nice to you and they are sending you nice messages, but probably right now is not the time to read them.
No, so, absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Anyway, all right. Well, we hope you've enjoyed.
That's been the 100.
We hope you've enjoyed the 100. It does feel a little bit like the end of the summer. It's the first day of September today, Sid. Kids going back to school. 100's done, but of course we've still got the end of the One Day Cup to go. So our season is not quite over.
Listening out for Raf on commentary from Birmingham this Thursday.
Oh yeah, on Thursday. Yeah, Warwickshire v Durham. So looking forward to that. Otherwise, we shall see you in a week.
Bye.